Hey guys, this is Dave, and this is kind of an exciting release, I guess, because we're going to be taking a look at the Juzear Defiant. Of course, this is a collaboration between Juzear and Zeos of Z Reviews, and I haven't had too many IEMs in this price range come across my review desk lately. I did review the Ibasso Clee a couple of months ago, but I had to go back about 7 months to find the RA15 review, and then right before that I reviewed the Delcy AE, and the Delcy AE is actually still my budget IEM of choice. Point is though, it has been a while, and I know that there have been other decent releases in this $100 price range like the Slavo SLA3 and a few others, but to be perfectly honest, I'm a little more intrigued by what's happening in the next bracket up, the $200 space, and besides, none of those $100 releases had really piqued my interest enough, I guess, to actually make me want to pull the trigger until this release. Because, well, it's Zeos, and based on some of his previous successful collaborations, I thought this one might be something I need to pay attention to. So fortunately, I was able to get my hands on a set, and well, I'm glad I did. We have a lot to talk about, so let's get started. Okay, so for this only being $100, this is really nicely accessorized, and I might have some B-roll of an unboxing running in the background at some point in this video because this was an exceptional unboxing experience for this $100 price point. And as you can see, you get the IEMs and cable, of course, and since the cable is modular, you get both a 4.4 balanced and a 3.5 single-ended termination, which is very cool. You also get a small but functional case, a decent selection of ear tips, a cleaning cloth, and then a pretty cool little Z Reviews themed desktop stand. As far as the drivers, this does have a hybrid configuration, and it consists of one dynamic driver and then 3 balanced armature drivers. And it's priced again at $100. And as I'd mentioned a moment ago, the unboxing experience and overall presentation of the Defiant is really quite impressive for this price point. And equally impressive is the build quality and the design of not just the IEMs, but the cable and the case, everything. And there are actually 2 faceplate options to choose from at checkout. This is the emerald green version, and then there's also one that has a mother of pearl style faceplate as well. And both versions look great, but this green faceplate is just absolutely perfect in my opinion. And again, the build quality with it having that solid resin shell is also very, very good. And the cable is also really nice, again, for this price point. It's not the softest cable, but it is quite manageable as far as untangling it, and it's also quite easy to roll up and store as well. And it also feels pretty durable, and my guess is it should hold up quite well over time with regular use. And I'm also digging the cable design as well. As for fit and comfort, these fit my ears really well. The contouring of the insides of the shells seem to sit nicely against my ears without causing any discomfort. That said, they do land on the larger side of medium, but again, because of how they approached the shaping and the contouring of the inside of the shell, I think it should fit most ears just fine. I had no discomfort at all. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to sound. Okay, so if you've been kind of following my reviews, my two top IMs within the $200 space, so that's the next bracket up, are the Juzear Butterfly 61T and then the AFU Performer 5 Plus 2, with the Butterfly being a little closer to my tuning preference, and then the 5 Plus 2 follows just very closely behind that. But what's interesting is that if you lay the graph of the 5 Plus 2 over the graph of the Defiant, they graph pretty similarly, but the Defiant has a little more upper mid-range energy than the 5 Plus 2. And those graph similarities actually do seem to carry over or match what I'm hearing when I do actual side-by-side comparisons with the two. So what I'm actually hearing matches pretty closely to what I'm seeing on paper. And again, the Defiant does have a little more upper mid-range energy than the 5 Plus 2, but their overall signatures are close enough, in my opinion, to fall within that same neutral / borderline V-shaped category. And I'm actually hearing some similarities between the Butterfly and the Defiant as far as their general tuning curve goes. Although the Butterfly is maybe more U-shaped, but I guess my point is that all three of these give me kind of a similar vibe. And after spending time with the Defiant, in many ways, I felt like I was able to get a lot of the same kind of listening enjoyment that both the 5 Plus 2 and Butterfly offered me, but for half the price, which was really impressive right out of the gate. So the signature of the Defiant is, again, it's kind of riding that line between neutral and V-shaped. So its presentation is going to be a little more exciting, but at the same time is maybe not restrained, but certainly more mature. And it always seems to maintain control, especially in its bass presentation, which is kind of rare at this price point. And since we are talking about bass, we'll go ahead and just use that to segue into the sound breakdown. So first thing that stood out to me about this IM was, again, how controlled its bass presentation is. Is it perfect? No. However, there are very few $100 IMs with this kind of control. And I will come back to that in a minute. But as far as the bass presentation in terms of quantity, this is what I would consider to be just a little north of neutral and maybe just a little bit boosted. And the focus is primarily on everything below about 200 hertz, because that's where that rise into the bass kind of starts. So you have a fairly decent amount of mid-bass presence. Plus, you're also going to get good extension as well. So you have a nice punchy mid-bass presentation, but then you also have a really nice amount of sub-bass as well. And that's kind of supporting the rest of the bass frequencies. Now, just to remind you, this does have a dynamic driver handling the bass frequencies. And I can tell because it is providing a fairly dynamic presentation, and it also does bring a nice amount of physicality. So it's going to give you a little more of that visceral bass experience, again, contributing to that exciting presentation. And then transitioning out of the mid bass into the lower mids, I do like the approach they took to that transition, because they've kept that transition pretty clean as far as trying to maintain bass separation. Now, there is some low, mid, and bass presence, more than what you might typically see with a Harman style tuning, and that does bring a little bit of warmth and a little bit of note weight, and it also adds some richness to male vocals. But I feel like they kept that pretty clean at the same time. There might be a little bit of bass bleed, but I think this might be one of the better bass presentations overall, again, that I've heard at this $100 price point. So along with that slightly weighty lower mid presentation, you also get some vocal and instrument detail and texture as well. Not a lot, but I think it's very respectable for this price point. And then as you move into the mid-range, more specifically the upper mids, that energy picks up a little bit more, definitely more than both the 5+2 and the Butterfly. Not a lot more, but it is enough to push vocals a little more forward, which is a good thing in my opinion, because I think it's needed to balance out some of that extra bass energy. But at the same time, I don't think vocals are too forward either. They have just enough energy to give you pretty good vocal clarity and also enough to keep things balanced overall, but without sounding shouty or overbearing. And instruments and vocals also sound pretty natural as well. And then moving up into the treble, as far as treble energy, I'd say it's actually pretty good. It's maybe a little on the smoother side, but I still feel like I'm getting enough energy from cymbals, and it's actually giving me a little more upper treble energy than the Explorer or Magic 1, which is nice because I felt like both of those were lacking a little in terms of air. So based on my preference, this does get just a little closer to what I like to hear, again, in terms of upper treble energy. By the way, speaking of good treble on a reasonably priced IM, and I know I'm way behind the curve on this IM, but I was finally able to get my hands on the Meze Alba. And I don't want to give away too much right now because I'm still kind of in the middle of testing it, but the Alba has some really incredible treble for this price point. And yes, the Alba does cost a little bit more, and I know it's just a single dynamic driver, but it's still fairly close in price. And it kind of sets the standard for, at least in my opinion, for what's achievable in terms of treble performance for the under $200 price bracket, in my opinion. And I just don't really feel like maybe the Defiant is quite there, especially in terms of treble details. Still good for $100, but I have to say the Alba really kind of just caught me off guard. But going back to the Defiant, again, bearing in mind we are talking about a $100 IM. As I always say, it's good to kind of temper your expectations when it comes to detail levels. And while I do feel this is pretty good for a budget set, I still feel like it falls behind when comparing it with some of my favorites at this price point. And then as far as soundstage and layering, I'd say it's just about average for this price point. So from a purely technical perspective, there are more resolving and more technical IEMs out there within this price range. But if I'm judging the Defiant based purely on its tuning, I actually think they did a great job. And based on my tuning preference, I think it can compete right up there with my favorites. And again, I do feel like the Delsey AE and even the AE 500 are better performers overall because they are tuned well, but they also bring decent technical performance to the table as well. But again, strictly speaking in terms of tuning, I do think the Defiant can hold its own within this price bracket. Now, where I really think the Defiant is kind of a standout is in its build quality and design. Of course, at the end of the day, it always comes down to sound performance, but I must say the build quality and design of both the IMs and cable are just excellent for this price point, in my opinion. So I guess if I were to try and just kind of bottom line everything, I do like the Defiant. And I do think, I think it's tuned well for this price point. I like that it has certain characteristics that remind me of the 5+2 and the 61T to some extent. And even though there are, again, IMs in this price range that are tuned equally as well, but also bring maybe better technical performance, I do still feel like it's close enough, especially when you consider the whole package. But I feel like it's close enough to hold its own, and I still feel like it has a place within this $100 price bracket. And again, I do think the bass is very clean for this price point as well. Now, of course, it's going to come down to your tuning preferences. And just to remind you, this isn't quite a V shape and it's not quite neutral. It's kind of sitting right in between the two. Maybe you could call it kind of subdued, but still kind of fun at the same time. So if that fits your preference, then the Defiant may be something to take under consideration. So that concludes my review of the Juzear Defiant. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch. If you like my content, please take a second and hit that subscribe button. I'm really close to hitting 10,000 subs. Also, if you would please comment on this video, please like this video, please share this video. I hope you guys have an awesome day.